There's a few, three core things that you need to know when it comes to paid advertising. That's targeting, marketing, and converting.
When someone does search for you, you want to make sure they're getting to the right place. And you can do this in a very low cost way with a branding campaign. So again, it's all about controlling your namespace.
First and foremost, if you're working with an agency and they tell you, no, you don't need to create landing pages, we're going to, just send your ads to the homepage of your website or even a practice area page, huge red flag. That is one of the biggest red flags that I see with people that we work with.
My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. I wanted to start out by giving a bit of background on our speakers, Samantha LaRousse and Thomas Sullivan. Samantha LaRousse is a web marketing lead on the Justia Amplify team with over 8 years of experience in the legal marketing field. While she helps Justia clients with both search engine optimization and search engine marketing, Google Ads is her area of expertise. She holds a Google Ads search certification as well as a BA in Creative Arts from San Jose State University. Thomas Sullivan is also a web marketing lead for the Justia Amplify team, where he focuses on search engine optimization and search engine marketing. He also holds a Google Ads search certification, as well as a BA in economics and a BA in communication studies from UCLA. Samantha and Thomas will be joining us for a live Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions that come up for you during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The webinar itself will be a little bit over an hour, and then the Q&A portion will commence. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Samantha and Thomas discussing Google Ads for Lawyers PPC.
All right, so welcome everybody to our presentation today. As I'm sure you're aware, we're going to be covering Google pay-per-click ads for lawyers. We're really excited to spend some time sharing the knowledge that we've gained over the years with you all, especially since this talk is going to be tailored specifically to the legal vertical. There's so many general resources out there on PPC. It's hard to kind of parse through that information and figure out what is or isn't applicable for your particular field. We're going to clear that up today. So let's not waste any time. Go ahead and dive right in. If you have tuned into our previous webinars, just be aware there's a huge difference between what we're covering today and the organic SEO related information that Sim has shared in the previous presentation. With Google search ads, what we're going to be covering today, you're spending money on each and every click. So making sure that you're really optimizing those clicks as much as possible is, should be of the utmost importance to you. So there's a few, three core things that you need to know when it comes to paid advertising. That's targeting, marketing, and converting. And targeting is going to be all about making sure your ads are getting to the right audience. So, you'll get advertisers who are paying anywhere from $5 a click upwards of $100 or even more than that per click. Budgets of $500 a month. Some people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every month on Google Ads. No matter where you land, you want to make sure that your ads are showing up in front of the right people. The marketing side of things, this is, taking that next step. Once your ad meets the right audience, your goal is to get them to click on your ad, get some more information. Here's where you want to be creative, use compelling language, appeal to the type of person who is going to be looking for your service. And then last, but certainly not least, converting. Once they click, you need to make sure that they take that next step. You want them to call you. You want them to submit a contact form, initiate a live chat. However you're determining your conversions, you want them to take that action once they've clicked on your ad. This also is going to include making sure that you have a solid plan for after the contact takes place. We'll cover that in a bit more detail later on as well. But now, we have those three goals in mind. We're going to go in depth on these topics to kind of really cover all those bases. So first, what is PPC? This will include, reasons why you should be running PPC ads, common types of campaigns that lawyers run, stuff like that. Next, we'll touch on the actual basics of setting up your campaigns. So this is where that targeting, marketing, and converting is going to come into play. And then finally, we'll touch on budgets and return on investments. So this is going to be, what you should consider when you're creating a budget for your campaign, tips for working with a tight budget, and also what type of return you should expect from your ads.
So what is PPC? There's three things that we're going to break down here. The first is the definition, just to make sure we're all on the same page there. Then we're going to go into why lawyers run Google Ads in the first place. Google Ads being one particular type of PPC, certainly the most popular one. And then lastly, we're going to go into three common types of campaigns. These are campaigns that, generally all lawyers should be running and taking advantage of them. So let's go ahead and first start with the definition. So what is PPC? PPC, or pay-per-click, is a model of digital advertising where the advertiser, which is you, pays a fee each time one of your ads is clicked. So you've probably heard of this before. Maybe you're even familiar with, some of these advertising platforms that we have on the next slide here. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these platforms. So we've included the logos for, some of the most popular PPC platforms here. The first of which is Google Ads. If you've been using this platform for a while, you might know it as Google AdWords, but they've changed over to Google Ads. In particular, what we're going to be looking at is search ads. So, these are ads that, of course, show on Google search results. They can also show on some other sites as well. But basically, this happens when your target keyword matches up with a user's search query, and an auction takes place in real time. So I mentioned it can show on some other websites out there. What we mean by that is Google Search Partners. So this is a proprietary list. Google doesn't reveal exactly what websites these are, but they do tend to be fairly reputable. So things like the New York Times or YouTube. Those are just a couple examples, and you can actually choose to opt out of search partners if you wish to do that. The second one here is Microsoft Ads. This is formerly known as Bing Ads. When you advertise with Microsoft Ads, your ads could show on a few different places. So they can show on Bing, they can show on AOL, they could also show on Yahoo owned and operated websites. So something interesting about Microsoft is they actually make it really easy for you to be able to import an existing Google Ads campaign. So if you're already running Google Ads and maybe you want to do a Microsoft Ads campaign, super easy to get that running. And the final platform here is Meta. So this includes Facebook, it includes Messenger, it includes Instagram, as well as the Meta Audience Network. So when you run your ad here, you're charged either per click or per number of impressions that you get. Now, there's actually something that you can do to remarket to existing website visitors with Facebook. That's generally something that, is more valuable for law firms as opposed to doing just the regular Facebook ads or Instagram ads. So something, that you can consider maybe in the future there. We do offer, services for all three of these platforms, but the one we're going to be focusing on today is Google Ads.
Yeah, so this brings us to our next topic of discussion, which is why why lawyers run Google Ads in the first place. One of the biggest reasons we're going to focus on Google PPC today is that Google is by far the most popular search engine. When you look at search engine market share nationwide, Google dominates. It's like 87%. So, following that, you have Microsoft, they're around 7%, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo. I mean, comparatively, very, very clear that Google is the place that you want to be advertising if you're going to be doing online ads. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the Google search results page. In this particular example, we're doing a search for San Jose car accident lawyer. So first things first, you'll see there's a lot of ads on the page. Of course, today we're going to be focusing on the PPC ads that you see here, but we also have the LSAs or the local services ads that show up at the top of the page. These are pay per lead ads. So at some point, we'll do a whole dedicated talk on the LSAs. There's a lot to get into there, but just so you know what those are, LSAs at the top of the page. Next, you have the map section or the local pack. Sometimes you'll get an ad in here, sometimes not. We'll go into that a little bit later. That's tied into the assets that you can set up on your ad. Otherwise, this is a great spot to get added visibility on the search results page. Again, so much information that we could go into here. We will do a separate webinar specifically on Google business profiles and what all you need to know there. But, just for the sake of today, this is what we're looking at. And then last, down at the bottom of the page, of course, we have our organic search results. Today, though, we are going to be focusing just on those Google pay-per-click ads. So let's take a closer look there. We love this example in particular because you see that image asset in action. We'll go over those assets a little bit later on, like I said, but, try and tell me that if you're the one who has your image showing up on the search results page, you're probably going to be the one who's getting that click versus the person who doesn't.
Yeah, so the next topic that we're going to cover is the 3 common types of campaigns. Again, these are, the 3 campaigns that lawyers should be setting up. The first of which is the practice areas. So this is really going to be covering the bread and butter practice areas for your law firm. In the example here, we're looking at truck accident lawyer in Charlotte, but it could also apply to, car accidents, motorcycle accidents, probate, divorce, DUI, criminal defense. So really those core areas. So they do tend to be a little bit more expensive, a little bit on the more competitive side compared to some of the other campaign types we're going to talk about. The second type is the specific events or niche terms. So you should definitely take advantage of this. It can apply to products liability cases or, specific events or even, kind of niche practice areas as well. Of course, all of these need to have some sort of legal tie-in there. But the example we're using is Camp Lejeune lawsuit. This, of course, is very timely. Another example could be a Hurricane Ian insurance claim lawyer. So that's kind of an example of, the events you could target. In terms of niche terms, you might do something like, a practice area that's maybe a little bit less competitive. So it could be, for example, personal injury would be more of the, core type of practice area you'd be covering. But maybe a niche example could be dog bite lawyer. That tends to be less competitive, also less expensive as a result. And then the final one is law firm or lawyer names. This is also called branding campaigns. So the idea here is that, you want to help control your own namespace. So you would be targeting your name, of course, the law firm name, as well as, maybe other lawyers at the law firm, just so you can help kind of control to the extent possible what people see when they search for you. Generally you don't have that same type of control with organic. And when someone does search for you, you want to make sure they're getting to the right place. And you can do this in a very low cost way with a branding campaign. So again, it's all about controlling your namespace. And you can see in this example that for Morgan & Morgan, the first ad we see here is for Morgan & Morgan's official website. If that's you, that's what you want to see. You want to see your branding ad in the first spot there. Generally, these are going to be very low cost for you because you're going to have, a high quality score for your own name. There's 2 other ads showing, and those are both competitors. Now, they could be bidding for Morgan & Morgan. They could have that as a keyword, or they might not. It's really difficult to tell nowadays just because the nature of these, the keyword behavior has changed a lot. But that said, there are competitors who, could try to do this intentionally, try to steal clicks away from you. So it's really important to protect your namespace. Go ahead and do, a low cost branding campaign. And just to summarize, these three types of campaigns for most lawyers and law firms, you're probably going to want to use a mix of each of these three different types. If you're working with a limited budget, maybe you don't do the core practice area campaign right away. Maybe you just start out with the niche, or event focused campaigns and a branding campaign just to keep things really simple. But at a minimum, you should be doing a branding campaign. Again, just protect your own name so that you can kind of help control what people see when they search for you.
So now that we've established this foundation on PPC, what it is, why lawyers use it, and the most common types of campaigns that you want to be running, we're going to go into the basics of actually setting up that campaign. So we've broken the basics down into 8 different sections, the first of which is going to be your ad schedule. So the ad schedule is going to determine the days and times that your ads are going to be eligible to run. Very straightforward. That section that you see at the top of the page with the chart that's just highlighting the days and times that you've selected for your ads to run. One thing we've noticed when working with our own clients is that calls tend to spike on Mondays. People think that law firms are closed on the weekends, they're working regular business hours. So come Monday, you end up getting this influx of content. When that's the case, you're probably going to want to increase your bids on Mondays, and you have the ability to do that within the ad schedule setup. So you'll see here what we've highlighted is that we've done a 20% bid adjustment on Mondays to try and capture those extra contacts. The bidding strategy that you have in place can impact whether your bid adjustments are going to be taken into account or not. Just keep that in mind when you're doing your setup. We'll go over the different bidding strategies a little bit later on here. So an important thing to consider when you're setting up your ad schedule is making sure that you're only running your ads when either you or somebody at your office is available to answer the phone. If you're using an answering service, maybe for after hours calls, at a minimum, they should be able to take down the caller's information and actually schedule a consultation for them. Don't just let them take a message and, move along. Unless they're telling that person that, the attorney is going to call you back in 5 minutes. In that case, okay, and you better call them back in 5 minutes. Otherwise, they really need to actually schedule that consultation. So it's locking that person down and making sure they're not going to just move on and call the next, law firm that's showing up. You realize, if you're running ads 24/7, not realistic that you're going to be able to, always take every single call. So in that case, make sure that you have a solid answering service in place. You want to make sure that, when you're running ads after hours, you might want to set up separate campaigns where you're bidding a little less, or, calls are being taken by the answering service versus when somebody at your office is actually answering the call and taking that intake information. There's also a lot of options out there for answering services. Don't get overwhelmed. Just, make sure that you do your due diligence, read reviews, do your research, ask for referrals. You should also be able to provide them with your own script for how you want them to handle those calls. So they're not just, taking it upon themselves to try and figure that out. You also want to make sure that you have a really clear process for being notified when a qualified lead comes in. Again, people move on fast. You want to make sure that you are, getting to those prospects as effectively as possible. So a little plug here, but if you are looking for an answering service, check out Justia Legal Deals. This was part of your free Justia Connect membership. There's a ton of discounts available for different answering service companies. Also a lot of other great deals on there, case management, research, billing, all that kind of stuff. The link's at the bottom of the page, just legaldeals.justia.com. And moving along, so, we touched on the stuff we touched on related to ad schedule is going to tie directly into that targeting that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So in short, don't run ads when, the phones aren't being answered by a live person. If you're using an answering service, they better be able to schedule consults, not just take a message. Bid more when you or someone at your office is answering the phone. Bid more on Mondays. That's when the calls are higher. You want to do it. And if you're not already running ads after business hours, you really should consider it. A lot of valid leads come in after work hours, about 5 to 9 p.m. So just something to keep in mind.
So the next thing that we want to talk about here is locations. And this is specifically the locations that you want to target and also the locations that you want to exclude. So there's several different factors that go into this. One is, what's the goal of your campaign? Maybe, your legal practice is statewide, and so you want to target the entire state. Or maybe, you just want to target, certain counties or certain cities where you prefer to get cases. So that's possible as well. And you can actually get even more specific than that. You can go down to, certain zip codes, certain neighborhoods. So that's one of the nice things about Google Ads is you can really get as, specific as you want to. One question we do get sometimes is, does it matter if I use location or radius, which is that feature we highlighted at the top there? Now, generally, we'd recommend, using location. It allows you to be a lot more specific. If you use radius, it is possible that you might include, some locations on there that are not necessarily, ones you wanted to include. So I would say try to use location just to be more accurate. Now, that does kind of relate to something. Sometimes people use radius because they think, I'm going to set a radius around my office. And it is true that, the locations near your office do tend to convert better. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. Maybe you want to bid a little bit more, for those people who are nearby your office, or maybe have a higher budget for that. And just depending on exactly where you're targeting, maybe it's a big state, maybe it's like, Texas or California. So to sort of be able to do that correctly, you might actually even need to set up a separate campaign for that. That being said, there are some smart bidding strategies that can take this into account in terms of, where the user is located and who's more likely to convert. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but definitely something to keep in mind when you're setting this up. So there are some different options here in terms of the advanced settings for your locations. So, as an example, those target locations we talked about, it is possible that, say you're a Los Angeles personal injury lawyer, maybe someone in, Miami, Florida is doing a search with intent for a Los Angeles injury lawyer. It is possible that they could see your ad in that case if you have presence or interest selected. So it could be people who are physically in the target location or people who are showing intent for your target location. So if you don't really, want to do that, you have options there to hone things in. You can do just presence or just search. Probably wouldn't recommend just doing search. And then there's also similar options for exclude. You can do presence or interest. And that kind of ties into the next thing we want to talk about, which is, excluding locations, which is really, something that's very important. So it's definitely something that you do want to take advantage of. And you can go in and, add the locations where you don't want your ads to show. In most cases, you're not going to want them to show outside of the US, maybe unless you're like an immigration lawyer, for example. But using the example of a Los Angeles injury lawyer, it's probably not going to do you much good if you get, a click from somebody in France, for example. So you're probably going to want to exclude that. You may even want to go ahead and exclude other states within the US where you just know you don't take cases from there, or maybe you don't want to. Now, something to note, and you can see this in the screenshot here, is that there are some locations where you actually can't exclude. And that's because the ads aren't supposed to show there. So one example is North Korea. where internet access is already, very limited, very restricted, but you can't exclude that location again because the ad's not supposed to show there. That's not to say you do definitely need to keep an eye out for things. Make sure you know where your clicks are coming from. Kind of an interesting side note is we did have a situation a few years back where we were running some ads for Justia, and we saw some weird activity, some clicks from Syria, Sudan, Iran, Cuba. And so we had to look into that and ultimately request a refund from Google for that. So, just keep an eye out for those things. The main point is definitely make sure you keep an eye out for where these clicks are coming from. So you're paying for the clicks that, that matter for you. And that brings us to, sort of the next topic, which is the user locations report. This is going to help you to really identify where those clicks are coming from. You can set this up in the reports tab in the ads interface. And, again, this is going to give you a very clear view of things. You can break it down by, even other metrics, including, the average cost per click. You can also look at impressions or conversions. And the main point is if you, use this report as a tool and you notice that, there's some locations here that, you don't want to show up, it's going to, let you know, hey, you should probably go back into, your excluded locations, maybe make some updates there. Or, maybe you want to go in and make some updates to the advanced location settings. So use this report as a tool, very important. And just to, kind of recap things for the location targeting, it seems obvious, but make sure you target the locality served, and do it correctly. If you are using presence or interest within those advanced settings, make sure you go in and you're really thorough with the excluded locations. So this should be other countries outside of your target area, or even other states as well. And then next, you want to make sure you're bidding more for those locations that are nearby your office. In some situations, it could require setting up a separate campaign for that. And then lastly, make sure you know where your clicks are coming from. Set up that report we talked about, and you can use that as a tool to help you go back and make adjustments as needed.
Perfect. So next up, we're going to cover the demographics targeting. There's a few useful metrics that Google allows you to target when you're trying to make sure that your ads are getting in front of the right people. On the campaign level, you can choose to target or not target based on these different data sets. So, as an example, say maybe you do sexual harassment plaintiff work and you decide, okay, I want to focus more advertising towards women. You can do that here. Google will also give you data based on the users who have clicked on your ads, depending on what campaign you're looking at. So here you're looking at the data based on age. They give it to you based on gender and also on estimated household income. So a good example for this one would be, say you're a firm going after high net worth divorce cases. It might make sense for you to exclude the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, or maybe just go after the top 10 to 20% of household income. And Google, they don't guarantee that this user information is 100% accurate. So, be thoughtful when you're making these choices. Don't think of this as being some kind of foolproof solution. You'll see here, a good chunk of the clicks and conversions are falling under that unknown category. So in order for Google to know if a searcher fits in one of these categories, they need to be first signed into their Google account. And then there needs to be some kind of indication within their account that, Google can make these determinations for the different categories. If they can't, then they're going to fall under unknown. So, just keep that in mind when you're doing your setup. Google does also give you the option to target specific audience segments within the demographic. There are a ton of options here. We don't have enough time to cover them all today, but it is worth checking out when you have some time on your own. The example that we're showing here is showing you all the options under the who they are or the detailed demographics section. This is just one of many. So, take some time, check this out wherever it's applicable, utilize those metrics. So main takeaways from the demographics targeting, the income demographic is helpful if you're targeting, those estate plannings of worst cases, stuff like that. So if it's applicable to you, take advantage of it. And then targeting by gender might be helpful for other practices. I gave that, plaintiff sexual harassment example where you might want to put an emphasis on female searchers. Just things to keep in mind. You have a lot of tools here to take advantage of. So if it's applicable to your practice, make sure you're checking into it.
All right. So first, let's go ahead and circle back to those 3 campaign types that we talked about earlier. So the first one is the practice areas. That's going to include those key terms like injury lawyer, accident lawyer, immigration law firm. And then you have the specific events or niche term campaigns. That's going to include things like Camp Lejeune lawyer, which is one we talked about, Roundup lawyer, Hurricane Ian insurance claim lawyer. And then lastly, you have the law firm or lawyer names. This is also known as the branding campaign. So it's going to be your name, your firm name, maybe, some attorneys that are also at the firm. So include all of that there. In general, these core practice areas are going to be more expensive than, the specific event and niche term keywords, as well as the branding keywords. So keep that in mind, just so you have a reasonable expectation there. Another thing to note is you really want to make sure you always include lawyer or law firm or attorney on your keywords. That's going to just help to, hone in on people who have the intent of hiring you, who are looking for lawyer services. If you were to do, for example, just car accident as a keyword, you're going to get a lot of junk there. People who are not looking to hire a lawyer. So versus, doing car accident lawyer, which is, going to target people who are looking to hire a lawyer. So that intent is already there. And then one other thing to note, you don't need to double up on things. So if you already have injury lawyer as a keyword, for example, you don't also need to include injury attorney. That's already covered. Google's smart enough to know that those are synonyms. So just kind of keep this in mind when you're looking at the keywords. Now, when it comes to the target keywords, there are 3 different match types that you are able to choose from. So there's broad match, there's phrase match, and exact match. There was previously something called broad match modified, which, we love very much. But sadly, that one is no longer. So we're sort of stuck with these 3. And each of these has their own notation. So broad match, for example, is just the plain keyword. For phrase match, the keyword is put into quotation marks. And then for exact match, the keyword is put into brackets. So just starting with sort of broad match first, this is, generally the match type that Google pushes for. Definitely gives them the most freedom. And, it really lets them to sort of decide, okay, well, what relates to that keyword? It's fairly vague. You're probably going to get a lot of junk searches if you do something like broad match. So something we don't recommend doing. And then there's phrase match, which is, generally a good middle of the road option. Something we would recommend using certainly over broad match. And these are just going to help to hone in things a little bit more. So the search term would need to include the meaning of your keyword in order to trigger the ad in this case. So again, probably recommend using phrase match. Exact match is the last match type. This is the tightest match type there is. So as an example, Google has here lawn mowing service as the keyword. In order for the ad to show for exact match, it's going to need to be that exact search or a very close variant that has the same meaning as your keyword. So maybe it would be, grass cutting service. That's a very close variant. So the ad could show in that example. But again, you probably are going to want to stick with something like phrase match.
So once you have those target keywords in place, you also need to consider the negative keywords that you want to set up within your account. So, this example, you're targeting criminal lawyer. You don't want your ads showing up for people doing searches like criminal lawyer jokes or criminal lawyer job. So you need to make sure that those are added as negative broad match keywords within your account. And we have a huge ongoing list of these types of common unwanted terms that we use as negative keywords for our own clients. This is just a small snapshot. The list is pretty extensive, but you get the idea. Attorney jokes, job, salaries, courses, all, those types of things. These are searches you don't want to show up for. Make sure you have those on your negative keyword list. A great tool that we recommend using for kind of determining these negative search terms is the search terms report. And this is going to help you add to that negative keyword list. If you see that there's searches on there that you don't want to be showing up for, that's a signal to you that you want to move those terms over. So just remember, you're paying for every single time somebody clicks on your ad. You want to make sure you're doing everything you can to make sure that you're getting only the most relevant and high quality clicks coming through. So, the example that we're looking at here is for a family law firm. They just so happen to not offer free consultation. So in checking this search terms report, you see that their ads are getting triggered for people looking for a family or divorce lawyer that offers free consultations. In this particular case, you want to add free as a negative broad match keyword, and that would prevent these searches from triggering your ad moving forward. So just to kind of recap all the important things we want to take away from the keyword setup, always include those service keywords within your list. Make sure that your ads are only getting served to people who are actually looking for an attorney. And phrase match is the match type that we recommend. Generally, you're just going to want to stick with that. And make sure that you're setting up those negative keywords and use that search terms report as a tool to try and find additional negative keywords to add to your list. This is an ever-changing, situation depending on the searches that are triggering your ads. So you're going to want to monitor that on a regular basis.
All right. So now that we have the keywords all squared away, let's move on to the next topic, which is bidding strategies. So this topic is a bit on the complex side. There's a lot of things to unpack here. To be honest, it really could be its own separate presentation, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to be focusing on, kind of providing a general overview of things. So there's a lot of different strategies that you can choose from. They basically vary between how manual or automatic you want the bidding to be. The first one here is a manual strategy, which is manual cost per click. This can be a good starting place for new advertisers who are maybe just trying to get the hang of things. The good thing about it is it allows you to set a max CPC. So you in a way can kind of control the max amount you're willing to pay for a bid. The sort of drawback here is it does take a lot of time to be able to manage all of these bids for your different keywords. So depending on how big your campaign is, also how much the campaign is growing, it just might not be feasible. It might not be scalable for the long term. But again, it can be a good starting point for things and certainly can help set you up, to maybe try out a different strategy in the future. So this is where the automated bidding strategies come into play. Now there's 9 different automated bidding strategies, 5 of which are considered to be smart bidding. So what do we mean when we say smart bidding? Basically, we're talking about a type of automated bidding that uses advanced machine learning. It's going to help you optimize your campaign for a particular goal. So Google's algorithm will use what they call auction time signals. And these are really, a vast array of things. It could be, the user device, the location, the browser, there's a bunch of other signals as well. Google does not reveal all the data that they have, but in order to take advantage of that data, you have to use smart bidding. So we're gonna, we have a breakdown here of all the different automated bidding strategies. We're not going to read through each definition. For the most part, it's fairly straightforward, generally what you would expect based on the name of each of these bidding strategies. But what we're going to do is just highlight a few that we think are, the most applicable to lawyers and law firms. So first off, we have maximize clicks. So this is going to help you get the most clicks for your budget. It's a regular automated bidding strategy, so it's not smart bidding. This can be great for maybe a new campaign that needs to, try and gain some volume, because in order to, use something like a smart bidding strategy, it is recommended that you have good volume first. Generally, that means, between 15 to 30 conversions per month. Once you do kind of see that, you can take advantage of maybe some smart bidding strategies like maximize conversions. So this is a smart bidding strategy. We do tend to like this one quite a bit. We use it for a lot of our campaigns. This strategy is going to help optimize you to get the most conversions possible for your budget. Now, as we mentioned before you use something like this, you want to make sure you have good volume. So generally that's between 15 to 30 conversions a month. And the reason is that, Google needs that data in order to feed their algorithm. So if you don't have that data, it's probably not going to perform that well. You'd probably be better suited with a different strategy. And then the last one here is maximize conversion value. So rather than just maximizing the number of conversions, this is going to help you to maximize for more valuable conversions based on different values that you assign. So as an example, maybe you give phone call conversions a higher value than a contact form conversion. So if that's the case, then their system is going to try and optimize you to get more phone call leads. And they're going to use their auction time signals, to try and determine the probability of which user is more likely to call versus another one. This is something we would really only recommend for a very large campaign, something with a lot of volume. You have a lot of data to give Google. It's probably only for people who are spending, upwards of like 30K a month. Because again, you need that volume for it to be able to work properly. I would not use it if, you fall below that. You're probably going to want to use a different strategy. So we can see here, we have all of those options again with just those, 3 highlighted that we talked about. Again, these are the 3 that are probably most applicable for lawyers who are doing their campaigns. Now, if you do want to go ahead and look into this in more detail, we do have an article on our Justia Onward blog. We have the short link there, so you can go ahead and check that out. There's a lot more detail in that than what we're able to talk about today. But just to, sort of recap things with the, bidding strategies. One is for new campaigns, you probably want to use a strategy like maximize clicks. This is going to help you to gain volume. And, really that's important to open up your options later on if you do want to try out smart bidding. For more established campaigns, something like maximize conversions could be a good option for you. Again, you want to make sure you have significant conversion volume before you implement something like this. But you can benefit from those smart bidding, auction time signals and all that information Google has. And then lastly, for very large or established campaigns, you might want to use something like maximize conversion value. That could be helpful in that situation.
All right. So now that we have a grasp on those bidding strategies, let's go ahead and run through the ad text setup. So first things first, we're going to look at the actual creation of your ad. This is the setup page for a responsive search ad. And first thing at the very top, they're going to ask you to input the URL for your landing page in the final URL field. So wherever you want your user to be directed when they click on your ad, that's the URL you want to put there. They also include an option for display path. So this is the URL that's going to show on the actual search results page. We like to use call to action there occasionally. You'll see in this example, we used recommended in the second part of the display path. It does help, a bit with click-through rates. So something to keep in mind when you're setting up your own ads, you can do something similar. Well, we have an example here of how that display path actually looks on the search results page. So the URL we have highlighted there, that's not the actual final URL. That's the text that you used on the ad setup page for the display path field. And then moving along, as you see here, the responsive search ads, they ask you to input multiple sets of headlines. So you can use up to 15 headlines here. They each allow up to 30 characters. You really just want to fill this out as much as possible. The next one down, you have the descriptions. You can input up to 4 of those, and they have a limit of 90 characters each. And, the goal with including all these different options is that you're giving Google a chance to test different combinations of your headlines and descriptions and figure out which of those combinations are going to get you the best result. So over time, as they're able to test things out more and more, they're going to end up serving the versions of your ads that perform the best the most often. So the ad text that you put together is really your opportunity to market to that target audience that we spent all this time setting up. So you really want to make the most of it. These examples here are, just a few of the many different types of things that you can highlight within your ad text and descriptions. Free consultation, your firm is 5-star rated, how many years of experience you have, no fee unless you win, featured results. The list goes on and on. Just take advantage of this opportunity to really promote yourself. In some states, there is a requirement by the bar that you have to use the firm name as the first part of your ad when you're doing paid advertising online. So if that's the case, there is this pinning feature that you're able to utilize. For this example in particular with the firm name, you just hit that little pin icon that's next to the headline with your firm name and set it to only show in position 1, and you're all set. Moving forward, whenever your ad is served, that firm name is always going to show in the first position. Just to note, Google's not a huge fan of this because it does limit the number of combinations that they can test when you're serving your ads. But, in some cases like this, you don't have a choice. You just have to go with it. So this is how those headlines and descriptions are going to look on the actual search results page. You have the top NJ family law attorneys, and the 5-star reviews are the 2 headlines that Google chose to feature. And then below that, there's a couple of descriptions. Those are just 2 of the 4 that you could have input within the interface. That said, you'll notice there are some other elements that are integrated on this page that are not part of that ad text setup. We'll get into those a little bit more in the next section here. I do want to just take a moment to recap some of the key points for setting up your ad text. So make sure you're using keywords in that URL display path. Ad text is all about marketing to your target audience. So, get creative, make sure that you're using language that appeals to them and is going to get that click. And Google, give Google as many combinations of the headlines and descriptions as you possibly can. Doing so is only going to work in your favor.
So next up here, we have the assets for the ads. These were formerly called extensions. If you've been doing Google Ads for a little while, you probably are more familiar with them as extensions. And that's because just recently, about a month ago, they changed them to be called assets. So as Samantha mentioned earlier, here's that example of the ad. there's a lot more, going on here than just the headlines and descriptions that we talked about. So all these other elements are the ad assets. And you can see that these really do make the ad a lot more attention grabbing. There's a lot more things that could get someone's interest to click on the ad. So the main advice is, use all the assets that you can, take advantage of them. Really think of these as tools to help you get more clicks. Google wants you to get clicks, by the way. That's how they get paid in this situation. So your job is to try and attract high quality clicks and then convert them, so send them to the right place to convert that lead. So let's just go ahead and we'll run through these various assets. So the first is the call asset. So, the call asset is something that is highly recommended to include. Technically, you can't include the phone number within your ad text, but you can add the phone number as a call asset, which is what you see here. There's a mobile version and then also a desktop version. So on mobile, it's really nice. You can just tap that to go ahead and make the call. So very, very nice there, very helpful for conversions. And then we have the image asset. So this one is a little bit newer. You might not see it in your account if you haven't been running ads for very long. Generally, it takes about 90 days before it would show up. But keep an eye out for it because you do want to take advantage of it. So when you do see it, you're going to want to, make sure you provide Google with a photo. They're going to give you the proper dimensions and the file type and all of that stuff. But we really do like this because it allows your Google ad to look a little bit more like an LSA, which of course helps with click-through rate a lot. So some general tips here, you want to make sure you use a single headshot. Typically, this is going to be, the main attorney, just a plain background. We have tried in the past submitting a group shot, and a lot of times it just gets rejected by Google. So, keep things simple. The image is pretty small, so you don't want it to be, too distracting. Keep it focused. That's really going to be the best way to go here. And also, if you just put yourself in the position of the user, if you are doing a search for an attorney and, you see several ads on the page, but there's, maybe one that stands out with that image asset, you're that much more likely to click on that one. It's just really attention grabbing. So next we have the call out asset. So this asset is, basically a way to help highlight certain offers and features that you have at the firm. So it could be, apply to things like, your record of success, how much experience you have, how many years. So all of those types of things. And like all the other assets that we're talking about today, the purpose here is to help with your click-through rate. And then we have the location asset. So this gives you an opportunity to tie in your Google business profile. It'll display your address as well as, your work hours there, the hours of operation. So highly recommended to do this, especially, when you're targeting people who are nearby your office. This is going to make it, that much easier to convert them. They're going to see that you're located very close by. Then following that, we have the site link extension, asset. So this is going to take people to specific pages, either on your website or your landing page, just depending how you have things set up. And so there's 2 descriptions you can have per site link. These really take up a lot of real estate on the page. So when they do show up, it really catches people's attention. They like to click on these. So definitely you want to include those. And then for this last extension or asset here, we're going to talk about the price asset, and we're going to look at a different ad. So the price asset is, really nice because it can help highlight if you offer a free consultation, for example. You can add 2 descriptions per price, the entry that you have. So in this example, there's a description above and a description below the $0 entry. Again, a really great way to advertise. You offer free consultations, but you could also use it if, maybe you get pricing up front for, certain services like wills and trusts. Maybe you have flat fees for those. Mm, Or maybe you offer $0 down to file for bankruptcy. So there's different ways that you could apply this just depending on your practice area. And lastly, just to sort of, summarize the ad assets here, the key point is really take advantage of all of these assets that you can, use them as tools to help improve your click-through rate. Now, Google may, not show all of these at the same time. In fact, it's pretty likely they're not. They're going to pick and choose, based on their algorithm and what they, see performs better in terms of getting you a click. But you want to make sure you have them all ready to go. So definitely, make sure you have all of these set up.
All right. So the last topic within the basics of setting up a campaign that we're going to cover today is the landing pages. One of the biggest mistakes that we see firms making is pointing their ads to like the homepage of their website or a practice area page. This does not work. Your website is built for SEO. There's all kinds of distractions on there. And when you're paying for that particular click, you want to make sure that you're bringing the user to a page that's built for conversions. That's what we're focused on here. So we're going to give you some great examples of how to build a top-notch landing page. Let's say you're running a campaign for different types of injuries. You're going to want to have a dedicated landing page for each of those specific practice areas that you're targeting. The information on those pages should be tailored to the specific practice area that you're talking about in your ad. So the example that we're looking at here, we're targeting general injury terms, injury lawyer, injury law firm, stuff like that. So you want to take those users to a general injury landing page. But say you're also targeting car accidents and you want to have a car accidents landing page specifically for that ad group. Same thing for truck accidents. If you're running ads for those, you want to have a dedicated landing page that's specific to that ad group. Last one here, medical malpractice. You get the idea. You want to tailor these pages to the exact keywords and ads that you're using to target. So let's take a closer look at that injury law landing page. There's a lot of elements on here that would make this what we consider a good landing page. So first one at the top, we have the call to action, phone number and header. Let's start this one over. Sorry. Okay, so starting from slide 75, let's take a closer look at that injury law landing page. So there's several elements on here that are going to make this a strong landing page. First one is the call to action and phone number that you see up in the header. Next, we have a section with a tagline, has some good catchy marketing language there. Next one down, we have the contact form at the top of the page. This makes it super easy for someone to contact you right when they land on the page. Next, you have some awards and accolades. You also have case results right below that. And these are all really great marketing for the firm that are going to make the users more likely to contact you. And then you also have that main headline that's right above the narrative area there. Just another opportunity to really catch the user's attention, work in some good marketing language. And from there, we scroll down the page a little bit and you get to these client reviews. These are super important. I would say on any, landing page, website, whatever it is, these tend to be the most looked at sections on any site. So including client reviews on your landing page is an absolute must. If you scroll down even further, you'll see we also include another contact form at the bottom of the page. And really, this is just, one last opportunity for that user to reach out. If they're scrolling up and down the page, it gives them, contact form at the top, contact form at the bottom. They have two different ways of reaching you. And of course, there's also going to be the mobile version of your landing page. This needs to be fast. Preferably, you want it to be AMP enabled. So those are the accelerated mobile pages. Vast majority of your traffic is probably going to come from mobile, so it only makes sense to ensure that you're fully optimized for those mobile searches. And Google also gives you the option when you're setting up your ads to include an AMP URL there, just kind of further proving the importance that Google places on having that fast load time with your mobile pages. You'll also notice on mobile that we have this tap to call button at the very top. At least for the Justia landing pages, this sticks at the top of the page as you scroll. So when someone's on their mobile device, it's basically ensuring that they are always one click away from being able to reach out to you. So big thing that ties into both your keyword, ad text, and landing page is going to be quality score. So taking the time to really tailor your landing pages to cover those specific practice areas that you're targeting with your keywords and ad tech is really going to help you achieve that high quality score that we're looking for. The reason that we care about this, aside from, higher conversion rates when your ad targets match really closely with your landing page, is that this also helps with lowering your average cost per click. So it's really a win-win. There's a couple things going on here on this particular page. So first, upper left-hand side, you see we have our target keyword. That target keyword, as well as, whatever other related terms are actually being used in that ad text that we see below. So Google, we know that they want to show ads that are most likely to be clicked on. That's how they make their money. So if they think ads not going to be clicked, probably not going to show up at the top of the page. When you have this direct correlation between your target keywords and the ad text, your ad tends to perform better. Then we go this next step in the journey when the user actually clicks on your ads and they get to this landing page. It should be obvious that, that page should also include those target keywords. Everything needs to, line up between those three elements. So, from a user standpoint, if you're looking for, say, a child custody lawyer, you get taken to a page that's covering all kinds of general family law. They're talking about divorce, mediation, prenup, all kinds of different things. Maybe there's one little mention of child custody, but that's not really the focus of the page. Is that person going to call you? It's questionable, maybe not. But when your landing page is specific to child custody and that's all you're talking about on the page, that person's going to be a lot more likely to call you. So that's what we're trying to get at here.
So that brings us to the last topic, the last main topic for today, which is budgets and return on investment. And the first thing we're going to explore here is what is the expected ROI for your campaign? Now, in order to actually calculate your return, you can use a formula like this, but you're going to need to make sure you're tracking your leads first and foremost. So how do you do this? One, you have to properly set up your conversion actions and track your leads, throughout the entire journey that they have. So this is really from start to finish. Now the conversion actions, that's going to be dependent on the different actions that, a user can take on your landing page, for example. So, maybe they can give you a call, or maybe they can submit a contact form. Maybe there's live chat. All of those things would need to have a conversion action set up for them, so that you're tracking all of those potential ways they can reach out to you. And then on top of that, your office does really need to be, keeping very detailed records of things, where the leads come from, who followed through, did that person get a consult, which of those leads turned into a case, as well as the projected value of that case if it's not yet settled. Or if it is settled, what was the final outcome there? So really super important. And related to that is call tracking. So, call tracking is very nice at helping to improve the transparency of your campaigns. You're going to know exactly, the calls that are coming in and from where they're coming from. So typically you'd also have access to the recordings. So it makes it very easy if, say, for example, your office needs to cross-reference things to see, was this lead from my Google Ads campaign? Yeah, it was. It's in the call tracking log. So this is an extra investment, but we do think it's, well worth it. There's a lot of different call tracking companies out there. So you can go ahead and, compare features, compare pricing, definitely do your research there. Just kind of a side note, but, we do include this for our clients again, just because it's so important. And it's going to help you with, your return on investment ultimately. So going back to, that big question, what is the expected ROI for my campaign? So it does vary, but at a minimum, your ROI should be between 3 to 5 times your total advertising spend. So this is factoring in, what you would pay Google directly, any administrative cost, as well as management fees if you're working with a PPC agency, for example. And just to kind of, put that into reference, we charge between 8 to 20% per month, depending on, your tier as well as the length of your agreement. So just to kind of, give you a reference point, but the main reason why the ROI can vary is that it really comes down to the practice area. So there's, some practice areas out there where leads are just more likely to convert. They're more likely to be, a real viable case. So it could be much more than 3 to 5 times. In general, estate planning, for example, as well as criminal law, DUI, divorce, those all tend to, be more likely to result in a case than personal injury leads, for example. Now, personal injury, it's kind of like a lottery ticket. But if you're a PI lawyer, you already know that. You're not getting paid right away. It takes time. It's based on contingency. So you might not see that money coming in right away.
So the second aspect that we want to explore is the question, can you run PPC ads on a budget? We see this all the time from clients that we work with, and, for good reason. The answer there is it depends. It's doable, but you have to be reasonable with your expectations. Just throwing out an example, we would consider $1,500 a month that your all-in budget pretty restrictive. So you need to understand that, you're not going to take that $1,500 and be able to target Miami personal injury. It's just, if that's all you have to work with, it's just not going to happen. So you want to start with, maybe some more niche practice areas like dog bite injuries or bicycle accidents. Or if you are set on targeting those more competitive, injury or car accident type searches, you might only target, a couple of zip codes or places, have a little bit lower population. You could also think about, only running your ads a couple days a week. Maybe you just run your ads on Mondays because, that's when, all those calls are going to be coming through. But the bottom line is, if you're going to be running your ads with a smaller budget, you need to get creative and you really need to focus things in. If your budget's only going to allow you a few clicks a day, those clicks are all over the place. You're getting one click for a car accident, another one for slip and fall, another one for a product liability. How on earth are you going to be able to really tell how your campaign is doing? You're not. So you need to focus in and make sure that that is, well understood when you're going into things with a smaller budget.
So lastly, we want to talk about some tips for helping to protect your investment. And really the first step is something we already talked about, which is making sure that you're tracking your leads. So we talked about a couple ways you can do that, setting up the conversion actions. Also, investing in call tracking is another great way. But you need to make sure you do this so that you know exactly, how your marketing dollars are being spent and what you're getting as a result of that. And the second item here is click fraud detection and prevention. So really your first line of defense with this is, going to be when you're going in and excluding, different locations. So maybe there are countries outside of, your target area. So going back to that personal injury lawyer in Los Angeles, probably a click from Russia is not going to be, of importance or of value to you. Probably they're not looking to hire you. So just excluding, other countries outside of your target is going to help to cut down on unrelated clicks and also some cases of click fraud as well. So make sure you do that. There's also software that is available to help with click fraud detection and prevention. Now, this could be from bots, it could be from competitors, really any of those sources that we have listed there. But the software essentially, it works by, you know, way of the Google Ads API, and it helps to block IP addresses with suspicious activity. So Google does kind of do this to some extent already. That said, we do recommend taking the additional step, going one step further, getting the software. It's just going to help protect you at the end of the day. So we do actually include, click fraud detection and prevention for our clients, just again, because it's really important and it's going to help you maximize your return. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help you, get the best return possible.
All right. So before we wrap things up, we wanted to take a few moments to kind of recap and go over some final thoughts from today's presentation. We hope that you learned a lot of valuable information when it comes to Google Ads for lawyers. It's something that we specialize in, we're really passionate about. So I just want to give you, some main takeaways from today's presentation. Number one, Google allows you to advertise on the most popular search engine in the nation. So they have about 87% of that search engine market share. If you're going to be advertising online, this is where you want to do it. No brainer. And second, follow those best practices that we talked about. Target, market, convert, track. These are, really important key things to take away today. That goes for, setting up your campaigns, tracking your leads, your return on investment. If it's too much to take on in-house, work with an agency you trust. We have a wonderful team here at Justia Amplify that we're happy to work with you. And last, Google Ads can help you get fast results, but keep in mind that's only one component of a more comprehensive marketing plan. Best strategies out there are going to include a mix of both organic SEO and also paid advertising. So that kind of wraps things up for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, we will go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of the webinar now. We have Sam and Thomas here with us today. Thank you both for being here. If anyone has questions for Samantha and Thomas, please feel free to click on that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. It looks like we already have a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. These questions are for either of you, so just feel free to answer as it comes. The first one we have is, how long does it take to see results if I'm starting from scratch?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start out, but just generally speaking, if you're starting from scratch, regardless of whether it's, a campaign or a brand new account, either way, you are going to end up going through a learning period with Google. That usually takes about 1 to 2 weeks, so you want to take that into account. And then once you're done with that learning period, I would give it at least another couple weeks to really, build up some data and, get some useful information to go off of. So overall, at least a month, if you could hold out and give it, maybe 6 weeks, the more data you have to look at, the more educated of a decision you can make when it comes to changes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, generally it's, it takes about a month or two, to really kind of start seeing some results. You should probably be gaining some traction by that point. We get people who start from scratch all the time, pretty frequently, I would say. In fact, if you look at, we have some different case studies available, but if you look at, I think it's the family law case study, I believe they actually started from scratch with us. So you can kind of check that out. You might get an idea from that. But yeah, generally a month or two.
All right, thank you both. Our next question is, some of my colleagues have mentioned that they bid on the names of competitors. Is this something that you recommend?
So for for competitor names, you can do, a branding campaign specifically targeting that. Yeah, I would say first and foremost, you should be, doing a branding campaign for your own, your own name, your own law firm name first. But if you are interested in maybe doing some competitor names, it's possible. But I would probably check with the state bar first, just to make sure, it's okay to do that. And if it is, it's sort of up to you if you want to go ahead and do that. If you see other people, kind of bidding on your name, then maybe you do want to, kind of bid on their name. But if that's not already going on, you could kind of be, starting something. So just be aware if someone's not already bidding on your name and you do this, then they're, probably going to start once they see it happening. It could be a little more expensive as well, compared to just your regular branding campaign. So keep that in mind, but it's possible to do that.
A lot of the cases that we see where people are bidding on a competitor's name is when you have, these firms out there that have been doing, PD commercials, billboards. They're on every, side of the bus that you see going by around town.
Mm.
In those situations, users, they don't have any personal ties to those types of firms, but they know their name. So they get, injured in a car accident and they're like, I've been seeing this billboard on the side of a bus for the last 5 years. I'm going to look these guys up. If you're bidding on their name, yeah, probably going to be a little bit more expensive, but because they have built that kind of separate brand recognition, it's your opportunity to kind of pick up on some of those clicks that, might otherwise go towards them.
All right, our next question is, currently I'm running ads for car accidents and they point to the homepage of my website. What difference should I expect if they point to a dedicated landing page instead?
I can go ahead and grab this one. So landing page, well, I guess first and foremost, if you're working with an agency and they tell you, no, you don't need to create landing pages, we're going to, just send your ads to the homepage of your website or even a practice area page, huge red flag. That is one of the biggest red flags that I see with people that we work with who either are, looking at different agencies or moved to us from a different agency. That should be biggest red flag if they're saying that you don't need landing pages. You do. The website, it's geared towards SEO. It probably has heavy content targeting keywords for SEO optimization. You have links all over the place going to different pages on your website. A lot of distractions. It's not built for conversions the way a PPC landing page is. Well, we don't do this extra step for no reason. We do it because it gets you better results, and it's absolutely worth it. I don't know, Thomas, did you have anything to add on there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. The landing pages are really super important. Just to, kind of add on, the messaging is very different as well. Like what you would see on the website versus what you would see on the landing page. The website's going to be very informational. It's built for SEO, like Samantha said. So it's probably not, there's definitely marketing language present, but that's not the main focus. Whereas with the landing page, that's the main focus. You want to drive people to take an action when they get there, call you, send a contact form, live chat, all of those things. So the messaging is a big deal, and it's very different.
All right. I think the last question that we have time for today is going to be, how frequently should I review the search terms report and add negative keywords?
So for the search terms, that's a really important tool. You should, definitely be taking advantage of it. I would say at a minimum, look at it every month, just as sort of a, regular housekeeping type of thing, general maintenance on the campaign. And definitely, when you do look at it, pay attention to, what you're seeing there. If there's some searches on there you don't want to be showing up for, use that as a signal to go ahead and, update your negative keywords list. So I'd say, minimum a month, but, maybe if you get, a lead or something that seems kind of off, maybe that's, hey, I should go and check the search terms report. So you can sort of, play it by ear in that way, but at least once a month.
Yeah, I think, once a month minimum. Some people, if you're running like multiple campaigns, you have really, really high search volume, maybe a little bit more often just so you stay on top of things. It's not, too overwhelming when you go and open that report and all of a sudden you have, 500 search terms to go through. But just housekeeping, do it regularly. Yeah, like Thomas said, anywhere from like a month to a couple weeks, depending on how many campaigns you have running.
Well, thank you both so much for all of your insight, and thank you all for submitting your questions. We're almost out of time for today, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Marina to wrap things up.
Yes, thank you, Nina, and thank you, Samantha and Thomas. And of course, thank you to all of you for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you learned a lot of great things that can help you really improve your law firm strategy and reach your goals. If you watched today's presentation and you're very excited about PPC, or you just want to learn a little bit more about how Justia can help for that, then I encourage you to explore our Justia Amplify PPC management services. We don't work with any other industries or any other verticals. All we do is work with law firms, which means our team really does understand what works for law firms and what helps you achieve your goals and really grow your practice. And you don't just have to take our word for it. We do have case studies available for you, like Sam and Thomas mentioned. And so if you go to amplify.justia.com, you'll be able to learn more about Justia Amplify, our PPC management services, as well as request one of those free case studies. And of course, our consultations are free. So if you want to learn more about what it can do for your firm, then reaching out to our team and learning more about just that, what we could do to help you, is free and no commitment. And then, of course, because you are all Justia Connect members, one more thing to remember is when you upgrade to Justia Connect Pro, you do get a $200 Justia credit that can be applied towards Justia Amplify PPC management services or some of our other marketing solutions. So really, if you have that annual Justia Connect Pro membership and then you buy something like Justia Amplify, that's it. It's paid for itself, your membership. So I encourage you to explore all of that and learn about how Justia can help you. Lastly, I just want to say once more, thank you all for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.